Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are in the world, and welcome to Chattering with Nicholas Vince. And this week we're going to be talking about Frankensteins and their monsters. So, as I mentioned in the publicity for this show, if you'd like to join me live, like my normal guests do, then do please leave a message with Craig in the comments, and that should give me enough information. As long as I know your Google username, I should be able to invite you on the show. You're obviously going to need a camera and a microphone, good lighting. Yeah, the only real tip. And if you're going to be using an iPad or iPhone, etc., make sure you've got it set up stable and that you've got plenty of light falling on your face, not behind you, because then you're just kind of silhouetted and it doesn't work like that, really. Anyway, so usual thanks to those who've subscribed to me this week to the YouTube show. I really do appreciate that. Thank you very much indeed. And also for those who've started liking the Chattering with Nicholas Vince page. I mentioned on last week's show that I'm going to be winding down the Chattering with Nicholas Vince Facebook group. That'll happen over the next month or so. And the reason I'm doing that is just basically because you can actually share posts from a page and you can't from within a group. So that makes far more sense to be running that. So yeah, keep it on. There should be a link in the on the show page for this on YouTube. If not, I'll make sure that that's there. So Chattering with Nicholas Vince, the page, that's where I'm going to be concentrating on making announcements and engaging with people, etc. So yeah, please keep a lookout for that and like it, and hit the thingy for making sure you get updates. Okay, so that's those. Right, I'm just checking it. I've got lots to cover this week. I've had so much fun watching Frankenstein's movies this week. Before I actually start talking about Frankenstein's and their movies, there are a couple of things I should mention. I've already done that one. And that was firstly, I mentioned that I was going to be doing something exciting last week. I was filming in Italy. First time I've ever done that. I filmed on continental Europe. Not the first time I filmed outside the UK, because obviously I filmed with Celtic Badger in Ireland. But on continental Europe, that was definitely the first time. And I was working on a movie called Fuck You, Immortality. Yes, I'm assuming this is adults watching this. Whether that will be the name of the film when it's actually released is interesting because of that F word. It might be F asterisk anyway, but that's the name of the working title of the film. So it's a horror comedy. I know Clive doesn't like the phrase horror comedy. It's either a comedy or it's horror. It's a comedy with a lot of gore and a lot of heart and a lot of laughs. I can't tell you too much more about it, obviously, because they're actually physically still filming until the 11th of April. I think they had today off and they had yesterday off. They certainly didn't have Good Friday off because I was talking to them about it, but had a wonderful time. So thank you to Alan, who's the casting director, and Federico, the director, for inviting me to be part of Fuck You, Immortality. It's on IMDb, and there is a link on my website. If you go to the projects page, you get very little detail, as I say, yet, because they're still filming. But hopefully, if all goes well, they should be releasing that later this year. It's a very funny script. I really enjoyed it. So yeah, it's more of that as I know, and hopefully to get Alan and Federico to come on the show to talk a little bit more about it once they've actually finished it, kind of busy at the moment. The other thing to, of course, give a shout out about is everybody who's bought from the shop, and to remind you, if you are thinking of buying from the shop, that the opening offers will be ending at noon on Friday of this coming week. So you've got about 5 days left, less than 5 days to purchase. So there's 25% off photographs, and there's even more discounts if you buy two or more photographs, 2 or 3 photographs. There are the 20% reduction on books and custom books, and you get, again, if you buy both books, there's that. And don't forget to keep an eye out for the special items, the first of which will be going live on the 15th of April. So yeah, that again, just www.nicholasvince.com/store. Yeah, so cool. Okay, Kim, thank you very much indeed for your comment. I will share that in a few moments. Before I do share this, I'm gonna have to wipe my nose. still got this terrible cold. I apologise, folks. Yeah. Right, I'm going to try not to sniff during this. So, Frankenstein. Oh, what can I say? The first thing I came across Frankenstein, funnily enough, Boris Karloff is my favourite to play the monster in 1931 film Frankenstein. I watched it with my father. It was one of my first horror films that I was allowed to watch growing up. Kim, you and I share a very similar experience with Frankenstein in that case. I'm pretty certain it's one of the very first horror films that I watched. In my case, it would have been with my mum, and I've told this story before, so I won't repeat it now. But basically, we watched it on Friday night on the BBC, and that was the first. And again, the thing that really struck me was that my sympathy was all with the creature, it was with Karloff. I really didn't care for Colin Clive, Viktor Frankenstein. So, but probably the most profound effects in terms of Frankenstein, and that is through this. Let's see if I can get this without too much reflection on it. Yes, and this is the Marvel Showcase, they called it. It's published by Marvel Comics, this book, and it's illustrated by Bernie Wrightson. And for me, I have to say that is my Frankenstein creature. That's the one I actually think of most when I think of that. So if you ever have a chance, look at it online. There are just some, as you expect from Bernie Wrightson, some amazing illustrations. Obviously, spoilers alert, guys. Sorry. There will be spoilers during this talk about Frankenstein. There's the Baron with the creature on his slab. It's just gorgeous. It's Bernie Wrightson. So what do you expect? So if you do, mine's rather tattered and torn. It cost me £3.95. So I probably got it sometime soon after it was published. So I'm going to start this off with a quote. Funny enough, one of my other favorite literary works, and that's Paradise Lost. And this comes from the frontispiece of the book, the original publication of the book. Did I request thee, maker, from my clay to mold me man? Did I solicit thee from darkness to promote me? This is from Adam in Paradise Lost. Now, obviously, Frankenstein is known as Prometheus Unbound. Prometheus is the being who stole the fire from the gods and gave it to mankind. So lots and lots of literary allusions. What am I talking about? Lots and lots of literary allusions in Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, one of which is comes across quite frequently, and that's the Rime of the Ancient Mariner by Samuel Taylor Coleridge. Again, if you ever have a chance, read that. If you've not read it, read that poem. It's not, I mean, it's long for a poem. I can't remember, 214 stanzas, something like that. It's not, but again, wonderful quotes. And one of my favorites quotes is from that is, like one who on a lonely road doth walk in fear and dread, and having once looked back, walks on, and turns no more his head, for he knows a frightful fiend doth close behind him tread. I always love that line for that, and it's quoted by Viktor Frankenstein. So we all know the story, we think, of Frankenstein, about the man who creates a creature. One of the things, but I think one of the things I'd like to talk about is the themes of for me, the theme, it comes across in reading synopses again. One of the main themes is friendship. apart from anything, in the films, it's knowledge we shouldn't have had. It's the scientist daring to try things that he shouldn't do, which always struck me as ridiculous. Scientists will always try and experiment, and they will always, we'd be living in caves, as it says in one of the, I think I'm quoting Peter Cushing in one of the Frankenstein movies, which I watched in the last couple of days, saying, without scientific progress, we'd still be living in caves, huddling around the fire. So scientists are always going to strive forward. And it's obviously Frankenstein's often alluded to now when we think about genetic research, and so on. And there are big moral questions to be answered here, but that whole idea that there is knowledge only reserved for God, pish, as far as I'm concerned. Man will always strive. He will always want to know. That's what men do. I'm almost remembering a quotation from Robert Browning, and who said, "A man's reach might outstretch his grasp, or what's a heaven for?" So I think this whole idea of not striving and not wanting and not being curious, and it just doesn't make any sense to me, but obviously an important theme and something. But for me, the book is about friendship. It's about abandonment, coupled with that parental responsibility, because the first thing, having created this creature, Frankenstein immediately rejects it. I mean, literally immediately rejects it. He's overcome by the horror of what is done. Kind of an interesting idea is this, basically, that Frankenstein is in a fugue state almost. He doesn't know what he's doing. He becomes so obsessed by something that monomaniacal, he has blinkers on and really doesn't see what else is going on. It allows him to commit atrocious acts in terms of robbing graves, etc., to get the flesh, to create the thing, to create the creature. So I do find that absolutely fascinating. So that's kind of the background. That's my view on Frankenstein. If you have a chance to read the book, I'm going to read from it later on. I'm going to quote it and explain mine later on as well. It really is a damn good read. It's written in the early 1830s, it was published 1830 odd. So it's written in the very early 19th century. So the language is flowery, if you wish, but I think it's gorgeous language. It's absolutely beautiful language. It's not modern English, but it's not like reading Shakespeare, and definitely not like reading Chaucer. So don't be scared and think, oh, I can't read it. It's worth picking up. It's free. It's obviously in public domain. It's well out of copyright. You can find it anywhere. I just downloaded a copy of it off iBooks in preparation for this show. So you don't have to pay any money. All you need to do is just spend some time reading that. So what I'd like to do now is please, as I say, if you'd like to come and talk to me about it, just let Craig know and I'll invite you onto the show. If you'd like to make comments, if you'd like to let me know your favorite Frankensteins, your favorite creatures, and why, please do so. And thanks again, Kim, for kicking us off. So here are some of my favorite Frankensteins, in no particular order, but these are the ones I really recommend you try and seek out if you can. And the first one is Frankenstein, the True Story. This is a 1976 made-for-TV with David McCullum and James Mason in it. And it's lovely. I think they did a couple of others, of the true stories, which they basically give you a completely different the question is posed, what if, okay, you know the book, you know all the films, but what if it was all based on a true story? and that therefore it allows them to take complete liberties, if you like, with the book and explore other things, and just come up with some really interesting ideas and entertainment. In this, the creature is played by Michael Sarrazin, who's got the most soulful eyes, as somebody described him. And really, so the creature fulfills Frankenstein's original intention to create a man who is absolutely perfect, who's physically, intellectually, too probate. Thank you. Yay, that's my first Frankenstein. I think I must have been, we would have watched it in 1976 when it was first broadcast. So just brilliant. And basically, the creature is beautiful. So you've got there's a real relationship, there's a real friendship. The Frankenstein behaves like a father. He takes the creature into society. As a little like Bernard Shaw's Pygmalion or the musical My Fair Lady. Gosh, there's an awful lot of literary allusions in here. Pygmalion, the story of the man whose statue came to life. That whole thing of taking him into society and showing him off, and this wonderful thing he's created. It's like, and I have to say, for me, there's a very gay thing going on here. Is that rather than father a son, you're gonna make yourself a man. Yes, and now I'm into Rocky Horror Show, and now I'm into Frankenfurter. I didn't even really think of Frankenfurter when I was thinking of putting this together. I really should have added this to the list. Yeah, let's add Rocky Horror Show to the list of famous Frankensteins and their creations. I can't believe I forgot. Yeah, Frankenfurter and Eddie, but I can't remember the name of his creature now. In just 7 days, he can make you a man. That is very, it's creation without procreation. And again, it's kind of, this whole idea, which again touches upon something else, why did Frankenstein create him? If not for companionship or to create a race of slaves? Is it, are we now going, it's another way, before mechanics and the idea of robots, is Frankenstein really trying to create a race of slaves? And to which we might think of Aldous Huxley's Brave New World, where people are grown in test tubes and they are put into certain segregated parts of society purely based on their function within society. Rocky, yes, Craig has just pointed out that the creature in Rocky Horror Show is Rocky. Yeah, I really should have remembered that. Thanks, Craig. So again, it's available on, I got it off Prime. Watched it on Prime. I think you might even be able to find it on YouTube. It's 2 hours long. James Mason is wonderful. Polidori, Dr. Polidori, he plays the character of Polidori. For those of you who know much about, you've probably watched Gothic. The film Gothic, which is about that weekend in Geneva where Mary Wollstonecraft Shelley wrote inspiration for Frankenstein. Polidori was a friend of Wollstonecraft and who wrote Vampire, spelt with a Y, which is a short story, credited as being the first vampire story in literature, proper vampire story in literature. He died at the age of 25. He died very young, possibly from suicide, most probably from suicide. Ian Malcolm from To Breve. Okay, your scientists were so preoccupied with whether they could, they didn't stop to think if they should. Ian Malcolm, pretty much how I see the Doctor. Yes, absolutely. It is. That's a very good, interesting point. Is Frankenstein doing this? Does he create a creature purely as an intellectual exercise? Does he do this just because he can, and to further scientific discovery, etc., without any sense of morality about it. So yeah, that's interesting. Going on to one of my other choices and that's Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, Kenneth Branagh. Now, Branagh, and I haven't read the book recently enough to remind myself whether or not this is still one of the motivations in the book. He loses his mother. Frankenstein loses his mother just before he's about to go off to university, and therefore becomes obsessed with the idea of reanimating the dead. An idea which is really nicely explored in that in that film. And this is the one with Robert DeNero as the creature. And that is, he is trying to overcome death. I'm not going to tell you about the ending of the film. It's beautifully explored. It's beautifully and gorgeously shot. I mean, the sets are amazing in that movie. You have a long, sweeping staircase in the Frankenstein mansion, and just a great set. You know, real proper film set for Gothic horror. And what was I saying? Yeah, this whole idea of whereas I'm losing my train of thought here because I've just started talking about sets and I've got the image of a red dress being carried up the stairs. It's the overcoming of death. He's driven by grief. Is Frankenstein's prime motivator grief over the loss of his mother, who he obviously loved very dearly? It's a good question, and I think really nicely explored. So if you haven't seen that one, I do recommend watching Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, the birth sequence, and again, really interesting. Branagh is stripped to the waist, and young man, then good-looking young man with his top off. It's very that he is, because it's the contrast between the perfect male figure and the abomination, if you like, that he's created. And again, the interesting thing, I was looking at this stuff, is you see this, you know, they're patchwork men. They're made of different bits of actually, I can take that out because I'm not listening to anybody at the moment. If you come on, I'll put them back in. Is he, you know, patchwork men? So the whole idea that wanting to create this perfect figure is obviously a nonsense to begin with, because he's never going to look gorgeous because he's covered in scars because of the way he's been literally sewn together. And then you have Branagh stripped to the fairly unnecessarily, from what I can see, but providing a contrast of figure of a man as opposed to the creature. And I'll talk a little bit more about the creature probably towards the end of what I think of my ideal creature. Chloe, I like The Evil of Frankenstein, 1964, because Peter Cushing is great as Dr. Frankenstein. Funny enough, is one of them that I was going to talk about a little bit later on, Chloe, but we'll quite happily talk about that now. The Peter Cushing Frankensteins. I watched 3 of the films yesterday. 4 of the films. And because Doug Bradley had mentioned Peter Cushing in these and over the series of the films. My personal favorite is Frankenstein Must Die. And one of the reasons is because of Freddie Jones's performance as the creature in this instance, because he's very intelligent. So you have Frankenstein succeeds in getting the right sort of brain put in his creation, and therefore, but then now you have, and it's alluded to in most of it, and in just having watched Bride of Frankenstein. If you think of Frankenstein and Bride of Frankenstein, those two parts of those two films, the 1931 and 1934 versions, kind of bookend, kind of cover most of the plot points from the book. They again, sorry folks, just kind of lost what it was I was saying. Is, look, for me, Freddie Jones is an intelligent and therefore articulate creature, and I think that's one of the most moving things. And I think that's probably, although there is a rape scene in it, it shows his depravity, but I'm always uncomfortable with rape in as part of entertainment, and but I think it's probably one of the strongest entries in that scene. Having said that, I do like the first one, The Curse of Frankenstein. And I do like Peter Cushing as Baron von Frankenstein. That yeah, it's worthy of, but probably I reckon certainly the first one. And I like, and I think the other strong, the ones that I've watched, I missed two of the six. I'd say Frankenstein Must Die is probably, and they should have, which is number 5, and they should have stopped. Really, they didn't need to make Frankenstein and the Monster from Hell, because basically it's a rehash of Revenge of Frankenstein, which is, I think, number 2. Great, Francis Matthews is in it. Anyway, but yeah, I thank you for mentioning Peter Cushing. I know Barbie, my friend Barbie, is a huge fan of Peter Cushing, and Doug Bradley, when he was on the show, mentioned that. So I'm really glad I got to watch those. So yeah, that's good. That's right, Kim. I completely agree with you about that, and I'm going to mention that in just a few moments. Another one of my favorites is Frankenstein 2016, directed by Bernard Rose, the Caustic Candyman. This is about, now this is, again, this is taking, I mentioned it earlier on, it's the question about the morality of science and what do you do, and why do you do things, just because you can, should you, and how do you deal with things that have gone wrong. But it's very cleverly done, very well done. I like it particularly because the creature is intelligent. Funnily enough, it has a very similar premise to Frankenstein, the True Story. The monster, the creature, starts as as beautiful to begin with, and he quotes from the film. He quotes from the book. He quotes speeches of the creature, and that is something that I wanted to touch on as well. But let me just share a couple of thoughts with from your viewers. Thank you so much. Loved Marty Feldman as Igor in Young Frankenstein. I thought Gene Wilder was fantastic in the film. I love the mix of comedy and horror, just as Abbott and Costello did. Now, I have a problem with Abbott and Costello and all those movies. I never really watched them, mostly because Dennis Gifford put me right off, having said the book I showed last week, about Book of Horror. He just was so dismissive of the Abbott and Costello ones. I really haven't watched. And I love Abbott and Costello. I think they're brilliant. They're geniuses. I think a very good one about a ghost. Nothing to do with the Frankenstein, where Costello plays the ghost of a Civil War soldier lost down a well. I really enjoyed that movie, which gave rise, I think, to the Funky Phantom cartoon series. Anyway, I digress. I'm going to come back to that. So, Mr. Stitch. Okay, to prevent Mr. Stitch, I'm not familiar with Mr. Stitch. It wasn't Frankenstein per se, but had a lot of the elements. Will Wheaton played a pretty good psychotic creature, plagued by memories of his parts. Oh, interesting. Mr. Stitch. Okay, I don't know that one at all. I will make a note of that to look that one up. Mr. Stitch. Okay, cool. Also loved Kim Lehman. Also loved Elsa Lanchester in The Bride and Frankenstein. I loved it, even though they were seen made as monsters. I loved the way they didn't see each other that way. Oh, that's interesting. That's not the classic interpretation of those moments. I love that they didn't see each other that way. Do you mean the creatures didn't see each other as monsters? because obviously the classic line is "She hate me," because yeah, I don't know the classic. She hates me. His reaction is that he sees himself as a monster, and she sees him as a monster. And is he a monster? Is the creature a monster because of the way people reacted to him? Which I'll come back to again at the end. That is a very interesting question, Kim. Does the bride see? And Pretorius refers to the bride as Frankenstein's bride. Now, that is very interesting. Does he mean Frankenstein the creature or Frankenstein the creator? Pretorius in the Bride of Frankenstein I'm talking about says that the moment, and Elsa Lanchester, wonderful with this long white gown, which obviously looks like a bridal gown, very much looks like a bridal gown. And Pretorius says Frankenstein's bride. Is he referring to the monster, or is he referring to Frankenstein? Frankenstein standing right there in front of him, and he knows that he's just got married. So, and again, it's wonderful. Craig is going to have to look up the name of the actor who plays Pretorius in Thesiger. Ernest Thesiger, got it. Ernest Thesiger. It's just a wonderful performance. Just a brilliant performance. I don't know why I never actually seen Bride of Frankenstein until this afternoon, and I fell asleep the first time, so I had to watch it, rewind it, and watch it again. Big lunch. It was a friend's birthday lunch today. Yeah, so who is he referring to? And of course, this comes back to the creature. The creature. I'm being very careful to call him the creature. Frankenstein is not the thing that got off the slab. Frankenstein is the creator of the thing that got off the slab, and which the old adage. You all know that Frankenstein isn't the monster, or is he? Because this is a man who's robbed graves to create, make the living undead, if you like. So it is a question. So who is the bride? Is the bride Frankenstein? Okay. Kim says yes. They didn't. She thinks, okay, cool. All right, then, Kim. Fair enough. Interesting. Very, very interesting. And Mr. Okay, cool. So Frankenstein 2016, Bernard Rose, I recommend you check that one out. I did find that very interesting, as I say, and you'll hear some quotes from those. Andy Warhol's Flesh for Frankenstein, notable for its creepy children, and Joe D'Alessandro without his clothes on. Hey, it's Andy Warhol and it's Joe D'Alessandro. Udo Kier. Patricia would kick me if I didn't mention Udo Kier. She pointed out that Patricia McCormack I'm referring to, who's been a guest on the show. I can't believe I didn't put him in the montage as well. I love it. It's it's nuts. Right. Frankenstein in this version is very clearly out to create a race of supermen, because the Romanian nation needs supermen. I don't know why the Romanian nation and why Frankenstein would be doing that, as he's Swiss, but never mind. Interesting. Okay, as well, but it's a damn good. Notable for two things. A very outwardly gay character, which is good, which is fine, which leads to obvious mishaps and fatal flaws in the planning, but also it's got necrophilia, it's just ridiculous, but worth a watch if you want to find it. I think you can only get on what I'm not sure if you can get on DVDs. On your regions, it may be different, but I have a look for Andy Warhol's Frankenstein, also known as Flesh for Frankenstein. It's a very interesting movie. So what I particularly like is the way they filmed the actor who played the creature, who grows about a foot in height, and it's just from a geotechnical perspective, it is really well done. I really admire that. Oh, sorry, I missed Mr. Shelton. Frankenstein Conquers the World, a B movie giant monster from Toho, Japan. Oh, that sounds fun. Which reminds me of King Kong versus Godzilla, starring Sean Connery. That's an interesting movie as well, with a mechanical Godzilla, from what I remember. But yeah, that's a good one. So Frankenstein Conquers the World. Danny, hi Danny. I see Blade Runner and RoboCop as containing allegorical elements of the Frankenstein story. Yes, Blade Runner definitely androids. Are they human androids, or are they grown or cultured? And there's more like RoboCop very definitely is bringing back somebody back from the dead. Blade Runner, I'm not. Yeah, allegorically, but RoboCop very definitely is a Frankenstein story. Okay, I'm going to kind of move on to one of my favorite films from this bunch, and that is the one that I watched last night, having watched all the Peter Cushing ones yesterday with Craig, and that's Young Frankenstein. And I'm still giggling and laughing about it. FrankenstEEn, as it's more properly done. It's done with such love. It is done with such love. If you've never seen this movie, please, I can't believe you haven't seen this movie. If you haven't, but please go and watch Young Frankenstein. It's just, it is so silly, but it's done with such love. And I hear wonderful things of the stage musical version that's currently on in the West End. That putting on the Ritz. What I found really funny was, having not seen The Bride of Frankenstein until this afternoon, watching Young Frankenstein, the whole idea of offering the monster a cigar, I thought was just Mel Brooks. No, that's in Bride of Frankenstein. I was thinking, really? So, the whole idea of the blind hermit and so on, I think, actually just comes from the. Well, no, sorry, no, it does come from the book. Yeah, the next. I don't know whether the cigar smoking comes from the book. I haven't read it recently enough to remember. It's obviously, 1970s. It's a good many decades since I actually had a chance to sit down and read Frankenstein. I want to read it again. Because I just didn't have a chance, and I really would just like to read Frankenstein again. So it's just silly. I mean, it's got some classic lines in. I go, give me a hand with the bags. Okay. You take the blonde, and I'll take the one in the turban. Yeah, just silly, just the silliest thing, and wonderful performances from Gene Wilder, who wrote the script and then had the original idea, and then worked with Mel Brooks, Young Frankenstein, putting on the Ritz. Just the silliest thing. Just watch Young Frankenstein. If you really, Craig and I both sat there and roared with laughter, literally the two of us. It's just brilliant. Another thing, I mean, I'm going to wrap this up fairly soon, but I'm going to mention another film that's related to this, and that is Gods and Monsters, which is a biopic. Sorry, Craig's just made me corpse, because if I say, for anyone who's seen the film, Frau Blucher, that's supposed to be a horse neighing. Yeah. just that's how to do a running gag, folks. So yeah, Young Frankenstein. Sorry, Gods and Monsters. I'm trying to do talk about Gods and Monsters. Clive Barker produced it. It stars Ian McKellen as James Whale, who was a gay man. And again, it's interesting. I think a lot of mentioned on the show in the past that people have come up to me at conventions and so on to talk about Nightbreed. A lot of gay people talking about Nightbreed, you know, about monsters and being treated like a monster. If you look at it, that particularly Bride of Frankenstein. I mean, Frankenstein is trussed up and raised above the crowd at one stage, like his arms aren't outstretched. He's tight, but as if he's about to. But there is something very Christ-like about the way the creature is treated. Gods and Monsters, a good movie. Again, really interesting. And got Brendan Fraser in it as well. Yeah, check out Gods and Monsters. I believe it's Bernard Rose who. I'll get Craig to check for me. The director of Gods and Monsters, please, Craig. I think it's Bernard Rose. Van Helsing, yeah, Michael. Van Helsing is awful, but Greg Cannon's Creature is quite good. Yeah, yes, that. And people have mentioned the creature in Penny Dreadful, which I still haven't got around to watching. I must watch Penny Dreadful. That's something for me to do later this week, is to sit and watch the first season, because I have an old DVD box set and really need to. Splice, directed by Vincenzo Natali, the story of pure Frankenstein's monster. Splice is another one. I think one of the things that it is, this is a book written 1830s, as I said. It has spawned an entire, this one book, 301 pages, has spawned an entire genre of horror movie. And it has inspired so many tales, so many reworkings. It is because it strikes at something fundamental to us as human beings. Can we conquer death? Can we survive death? Is this a way to become immortal, as it says? You know, if we can just take our brain from one body to another, isn't that immortality? Yeah, because the idea of immortality is horrible if you think of having the same body. You know, the mind. But if you were able to take your mind at, you know, 60, 70, and push yourself into a new, and in fact, what's the perfect age to take your brain and put it in another body? How do you, that's a really interesting question. What's the perfect age at which to take your brain and put it into a new body so that you can constantly experience new things and so on? And then just how often would you want to do that? I remember there's a short story, I can't remember who it's by or the title of it, which is the idea that somebody is executed, and then they take the moment just before death, they take his personality out of the body and put it into a new one, so they can execute him again. So he's constantly, it's hundreds, dozens of times, hundreds possibly times this happens to this character. And is that what we think of as immortality, a way of punishing somebody for a crime again and again and again and again? But is that what we really aspire to? And there is, you know, for my part, death is the reason why life is so wonderful. If you didn't know that at any moment, literally any moment, and I know if you're a teenager, you can't possibly believe this is true. But that any moment you're not here, and that's what actually gives your life purpose, meaning that because it's finite, you're something you've to strive for. So again, one of the themes, Bill Condon, sorry, it wasn't Michael Rose, it was Bill Condon who directed Gods and Monsters. Thank you, Craig. Yeah, it's Michael Rose who directed Frankenstein. Bernard Rose, not Michael Rose, Bernard Rose. Oh, and Michael mentioning that somebody else mentioned as well, the Frankenstein Chronicles TV series, which I think is on Netflix. need to get Netflix. Okay. Very slow but interesting. So yeah, this is very good. Okay, I'm going to start winding this up. I'm going to, it takes a little while. When you type things in, it takes a little while for the message to actually reach me over the internet. I know Craig's only downstairs, but we use Twitter, so he's got to copy and paste it and so on. So it does take a little time. Who do you think played the monster the best? Boris Karloff for me. Christopher Lee is my favorite to have played Dracula. To be honest, I'm disappointed. The question Kim asked, who do you think played the monster best? Boris Karloff for me. Christopher Lee is my favorite to have played Dracula. Christopher Lee, of course, played the creature as well. Not Karloff. And that's not Karloff's fault. It's the way it's written and directed. And it's not. It's mentioned. It's alluded to in Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, the Kenneth Branagh one. But in the book, the creature is away from Frankenstein for nearly a year. And in that time learns both French and Italian, I think, off the top of my head. And by the end of the book, speaks English by the time he meets the conversation. For those of you who don't know, the book starts with an Arctic expedition and ends with and Frankenstein chasing the monster to the North Pole. And incidentally, whilst I mustn't forget, Steve Niles and Bernie Wrightson did a wonderful comic book series based on with Wrightson illustrating, written by Steve Niles, 28 Days of Night, and wonderfully talented writer Steve Niles, and check out those comics as well, which basically takes the creature away after the Arctic episode. So to my honest, I think this is one of the reasons why I like Frankenstein, the true story, so much, is that he's childlike, he's intelligent, as you'll find in a couple of moments. To me, that's the tragedy of the creature. He is intelligent, and therefore, I don't think any of the creatures that you see on film truly represent. And I would love to see a Frankenstein, and possibly Frankenstein by 2016 by Bernard Rose comes closest to it, because this is an intelligent creature, and the shuffling. I mean, you get huge sympathy from Karloff. Don't get me wrong, and I love that. You know, the Karloff in the first movie, when the Hunchback taunts him with the fire, that reaction and that whole thing. But for me, the creature isn't a thing that stands very tall, walks like with his arms out like that's just wrong as far as I'm concerned. Just remembering Young Frankenstein. So you gave me the brain. Yes, Abby Normal. Yes, Abby Normal. That's whose brain we got, not the genius brain. So Luke Gossett, definitely the cutest one and very angsty. Reanimator. Oh, Reanimator. Yeah, really good. Yes, Mr. Shelton. Reanimator. Very Mr. Coombs, very sexy, Mr. Coombs in Reanimator, disturbingly so. Anyway, I did just want to read something from the book to end. Thank you for all your suggestions. This is really, really interesting. Thank you very much indeed for joining me, but I am losing my voice. I do want to, I don't have anything more to say. I'm just waiting for this. Oh, brilliant. It's actually got itself onto one page. So as I mentioned in the book, the framing reference is a captain on an Arctic expedition who comes across Frankenstein and the creature. Frankenstein makes the ship, and so tells his story to the captain, Captain Walton, who, funnily enough, starts the whole book by talking about writing to his sister, saying how lonely he is and how he's looking for a companion. And doesn't find anybody on the crew, but finds an intellectual equal in Frankenstein who tells him the story as a warning to not push on to try and find his way. Frankenstein dies, and Walton goes up on deck and then comes back downstairs to find the creature weeping over the body of his creator, his father, as he says in one of the adaptations. And this is probably, funnily enough, this was an audition speech when I used to do audition speech. It was 30 odd years ago, so please, this is not a performance. And I just want to read you something. So the captain accuses the creature of mockery, that he can't possibly feel the things that he says over the loss of Frankenstein. And accuses him of only weeping over Frankenstein because he can no longer pursue his revenge on Frankenstein. So, quick sip of water. And the creature says, "No sympathy may I ever find. First, when I first sought it, it was the love of virtue, the feelings of happiness and affection with which my whole being overflowed, that I wished to be participated. But now that virtue has become to me a shadow, and that happiness and affection are turned into bitter and loathing despair. In what should I seek for sympathy? I am content to suffer alone while my sufferings may endure. When I die, I am well satisfied that abhorrence and opprobrium should load my memory. Once, my fancy was soothed with dreams of virtue, of fame, and of enjoyment. Once, I falsely hoped to meet with beings who, pardoning my outward form, would love me for the excellent qualities which I was capable of unfolding. I was nourished with high thoughts of honor and devotion. But now, crime has degraded me beneath the meanest animal. No guilt, no mischief, no malignancy, no misery can be found comparable with mine. When I run over the frightful catalogue of my sins, I cannot believe I am the same creature whose thoughts were once filled with sublime and transcendent visions of the beauty and majesty of goodness. But it is even so. The fallen angel becomes a malignant devil. Yet, even that enemy of God and man had friends and associates in his desolation. I am alone. Thank you very much indeed for watching and joining me on this. God, I've been talking for nearly an hour. What a surprise. Hopefully you'll be able to join me next week when I'm going to be joined by Carl Medland. We're going to be talking about his feature film, The Spiritualist, which is available online and so on. I'll put more details. I'm going to be talking about the 3 films which influence him the most. I'm really looking forward to talking to Carl. So as I say, hopefully some of you will come and join us next week. In the meantime, yeah, I was going to try and give you something sensible to think about. No, I'm not going to try and top Mary Shelley. Just read the book. This has been Chattering with Nicholas Vince. I've been talking about Frankensteins and their monsters. Thank you very much indeed for joining me, and I hopefully